Hello, this is Bob74H, back with another video, and today I will be discussing animation and demographics, and how that relates to live-action interpretations of these various properties. So, the Western interpretation is that animation is for children because they were raised with that medium as children. So they assume that the medium as a whole is for children, which is a completely irrational position to hold. However, being rational is not something people do because they look towards what they believe or how they feel or what is, or not what actually exists. They just believe things or feel certain ways because they have a certain inclination to these certain matters. It's why, people will believe in religion, or why people will believe in COVID, or why people will believe in this or that. It doesn't matter in what they believe in. As I'm not trying to say COVID is some belief or something. I'm just using that as an equivalent example to say people will believe things regardless of the facts presented. You could say that as a negative or positive. You could say people don't believe the COVID, or you could say people do believe the COVID, whatever, it doesn't matter. The example at large is that people will believe whatever, regardless of what is. It's called confirmation bias. So, the thing is with this, is these people who create these films and mediums, they assume that the thing that they're adapting is inherently childish and or bad, so they will try to get away from that. And at which point, there's no point in adapting it because they're changing the entire foundation of what it is and what it stood for. So it makes no sense for it to be adapted into that medium if they're not trying to keep the essence or thing of what it was, like the soul of what it was, you could say. So the issue being with this is that Westerners assume that because something isn't violent, gory, or sexual, that it's somehow not mature because, philosophical lessons can't exist, discussions of psychology and the righteousness of if killing is fine or not. Like, these discussions are inherently philosophical, right? However, they cannot be discussed in certain depths because if the medium they're portrayed in is considered childish, then it's not deemed okay. It's been this way for periods upon periods of years. Like in the 90s, it was video games. Video games are childish and bad. Nowadays, everyone plays video games. It's the same thing as it was in the 70s with the rock music and with the rap music, how it was before. People are just inclined not to accept certain things because they hold a religious or personal bias towards one thing or another. Again, that's just a sad fact of reality. And these Netflix shows are proof of that. They will adapt various shows like Winx Club, Death Note, Fullmetal Alchemist, Cowboy Bebop. All these shows are varied in tone and quality, yet they adapt them all the same way as if they're the same property. Because what they care for is not to make a adaptation or stick to the source material. They're just trying to get money, so they don't care at all about the merit or the factual meaning behind the product. So the thing is with that is that at which point there's no point in making it. Like, if you're going to change Godzilla from a prehistoric dinosaur with atomic breath and superhuman strength to a giant iguana, then what's the point in making it a Godzilla film if it has nothing to do with Godzilla? So when they did put Godzilla, the newer Godzilla, into a Godzilla film, they dubbed him Zilla because the people at Toho did not consider him to be Godzilla. And that's how he's been since, and that's kind of how he's retroactively referred to. So the same can be said with Light Turner, right? So people just call him Turner because they don't consider him to be Light Yagami. So it's going to be seen the same way with this Winx Club adaptation and this Cowboy Bebop adaptation coming up soon. So I just wanted to make this note. Mother's Basement did a good video on this. He didn't really explore the concepts and reasons being for why these things take place, but I wanted to cover the details more in depth. as I found this topic to be particularly interesting, and I did bring it up before. And I wanted to, as a side note, I wanted to bring this up. I called the Pornhub ban. I knew it was going to happen. I made a video about it a day or so before it happened, and I just want to say, with Pornhub, it was an okay porn site. However, the reason being is why I'm bringing this up is I just wanted to point out how I called it. I know it's a side note, but yeah. Back to the topic at hand. I just wanted to bring that point of contention up right there because I found it to be interesting or of merit. So what happened with this idea of fans is you assume that you have to be gritty or sexual to be mature, which is completely redundant and stupid. Because there's definitely more themes and more different types of tonal discussions you can have with things that don't involve sex or drugs. Like, you can discuss philosophy, and that could be mature, and it still be, completely PG in terms of, like, content. But even if you say, well, anime is for kids, whatever have you, they said the same thing with video games in spite of, GTA existing at that time. They said the same thing about punk music, rock music, whatever have you. And this will never change. There's always going to be the old people will always decree or be against the new people, the younger folk, because they like things that are different to them. It's because they want to preserve their culture, right? That's kind of how they've presented it, right? It's the same reason why there's people who say, well, fuck trannies, fuck traps, fuck whatever. And I can see your perspective and the reasoning towards that being like I could see why you would think that. However, it's mostly based, and I don't like the new idea or culture of this situation, so I'm going to do my best to destroy it. And I'm not saying that culture is inherently good or bad, or the arguments being are bad or whatever. I'm saying it's based on a primordial, I want to keep American culture alive, I want to conserve it. Anyways, this is getting off topic because it's the same kind of point I was getting at with the situation at hand, is they see cartoons as like the kid shit. So they're like, okay, we need to preserve it as the kid shit. So what they'll do is they'll shut down adult animation, they'll ignore it entirely, and pretend it doesn't exist. All the while, their plays, their soap operas, and other shows with very unrealistic settings while acting as if they're watching the most realistic and adult shit possible. They sit down here and watch, 90 Day Fiancé or whatever other dating show that exists now, and then they tell us about how they're watching the enlightened content, about how it's so mature and how it's so enlightened. And it's obviously acted out, it's obviously faked, and it's very immature in its tone. But then they lambast us for watching Berserk or Attack on Titan. It's really a hypocritical position, in which they do not understand how hypocritical it is, because they're stationed in this zone of bias. They don't want to leave their their throne or their area in which they exist in. They want to live in this neglect, or they want to live in ignorance of the reality that be, because people are subjectively inclined to think what they want. The same could be said with me, I guess. You could counter argue by saying, well, you prefer anime and shit like that, so you would be correct. And to say that wouldn't be a basis for as to why I think that would be completely incorrect, because obviously, even if I'm not consciously thinking that, well, I like it, so I'm gonna be better, or something akin to that, I subconsciously will have that thing in my mind, even though I'm not consciously processing it. That's what people don't get. They don't get that the subconscious mind exists, right? They don't get that there's a being beyond your conscious, right? I'm not saying mysticism or something like that. I'm merely inferring that there is a mind beyond that of your conscious. Like, that's why you can subconsciously, say, sit in the same spot consistently, or you can subconsciously, do hand movements or, certain gestures that you don't notice. But it's why, like, when people sometimes, they'll roll their eyes, maybe intentional or not. But that's an example of how there's mannerisms that come up subconsciously. And this isn't something equivalent to now. Like, you would have that before too, where you would see people subconsciously address others in a certain way, and they're like, "Well, I'm sorry, I meant that." Like, you have that with teachers, right? You see a lot of kids will refer to the teachers as mom or dad by accident, because they hold that same position of authority. So that's why they're mistaking it, because subconsciously they're viewing that teacher through a lens of authority, right? They're a position of power. So they see them in the same role, which is part of the reason why they will accidentally refer to them as parents, as a parent role, because they kind of function in that manner. Anyways, I'm going to go get some. So a lot of it is creative liberty as well. So you have to think they do want some creative control over the medium. So they will kind of make excuses as to reasons why. They will say, "Oh, it's not as realistic," and then they will add like more very unrealistic manners or very unrealistic quantities to it. Like, for example, in the Netflix adaptation of Death Note, after Turner meets Misa, he immediately trusts her with the Death Note. While in the anime/manga, when he meets her, she already knows of his identity, and she already knows that he is Kira. Therefore, he is put in a position of neglect, as he can't kill her, and he can't get rid of her. So he's essentially forced to apply with her demands and trust her, because he has no other choice but to trust her in that position. Because if he didn't trust her, or didn't allow her to have some leverage over him, he would get reported to the cops and the series would end. However, she wouldn't do that because of her character and her attachment to Light. However, that doesn't matter, because that was merely the point as to why he had to trust her in the anime versus the Netflix show. However, my point being with this is it's not a matter of being unrealistic, as they would like to say, because it's more so unrealistic than the thing they're adapting in most cases. Like, look at the 2014 Godzilla design, which is supposed to be realistic, and the 1998 one, which is called Zilla. And you can just see how one looks really realistic compared to the other. Like, the Zilla design is very large. It's a very large design, as you know, because it's supposed to be based off Godzilla. But the proportions are completely unrealistic, which is my point. If you look at the design, the legs are about twice the size of the body. The design, at least, like the in movie design. The TV series kind of fixes it so he looks normal, like he has normal proportions. But the movie itself has very unrealistic proportions for the Zilla character. And just a note before someone comments in the comment section, I know Zilla from the TV series is a different character. You don't need to tell me. I know he actually has a name, and it's called Zilla Jr., Godzilla Jr., whatever you want to call him. Godzilla Jr. already has a name, and he's based after his father, Zilla, so it makes more sense to call him Zilla Jr. And before someone says, well, the 1989 one isn't the same one as the one in the King of Monsters, I think it is. It was the one where Godzilla one-shot Zilla. Anyways, they retroactively referred to Godzilla as Zilla in that movie. So it is the same character. You don't have a line of merit to say otherwise. Toho retroactively changed that detail. You can say what you must, and you can get triggered if you like. I don't care. The fact of the matter is that Zilla is the character's name from henceforth. And the 1998 one is the same one. The same character, the same design, whatever you want to say. And to say otherwise shows complete ignorance at the portrayal of the film. The portrayal of the film in question. So, back to the topic at hand, they like creative control as it makes them look more responsible. So if they make a mistake, or in the case they succeed, the credit goes to them. So, like I was saying with my previous remarks, is the unrealistic design that they so hate has more better proportions than the one they are using. Like the proportions of the most childish Godzilla design is Little Godzilla. That's a very childish Godzilla design. And it still has realistic proportions for an animal who would have a body figure of that sort. While Zilla looks completely unrealistic, his legs are about 80 times the size of his body. And yes, I'm over dramatizing there, but it's definitely too large for the size of the creature given. And you could say, well, that's just one shot. It's still a shot of the creature from the movie, and it's a major shot in the movie as well. Like, you look up Zilla, and it's one of the first shots you get. So to say it's not a important detail of the character's design is completely incorrect. And there's a lot of other flaws with that movie, but I'm not here to rant on Zilla or beat the dead horse that it is. I'm here to explain why these things happen. And why they happen is because people want creative control, so if they succeed, they can appraise it as, oh man, look how successful this is. And I've seen Amazing Spider-Man 2, and people have seen it as well, and it's unanimously agreed that the animated adaptation of the Spider-Man, Miles Morales, is much better than the Amazing Spider-Man version. And you could say, well, they're not the same version, and you would be correct. I'm saying they're adaptations of the Spider-Man mythos or character. So in that sense, they are equivalent versions of one another, just one is inherently better. And you could say, well, you're just biased towards this side or that side. It doesn't matter, because the amount of plot holes and the amount of stupidity in that movie is insane compared to the other one. And you could argue otherwise, but I mean, I will provide arguments for the other side, and as will you, of course, if you are trying to argue against me. So,